Hello, everybody. For those of you who did not know Jake, you're going to get a lot of Jake up in your grill just for the first few minutes of today. But I hope there's also something universal about our loss and our lives and something that he can impart. I'm Mary Katharine. I'm Jake Brewer's wife. I don't want to be too hipster about it, but the first time I spoke at PDF was 2005. It's been a while. That might have even been before Jake. But I don't think we ever spoke together, but it's certainly been, this community and this event have been part of our lives. This is our first daughter watching Jake over the live stream. Nice job, everybody. In 2014. This was supposed to be a light talk, the way that Jake pitched it. I am doing a talk that Jake pitched, fittingly, before he passed away, to myself and to Mika and to some others in the room. And so it seemed the right thing to do to ask to give it, and they were nice enough to allow me to give it in his memory. It was supposed to be sort of funny, introspective, but sort of funny. It's going to be a little different than that now. But let me warn you, this is about to get real. I do this to people a lot because it's a funny thing. Death and grief are universal. There is not one person in this room who will not experience the consequences. But I think I surprise people because sometimes they'll catch me treating it seemingly casually. Because I live up close and personal with this loss every single day. And this truth and this grief, it's my companion. And I can't ignore it, so I hang out with it. And I laugh at it sometimes, including, as I was thinking about this, I was like, well, I'm going to come and speak about this. And it occurs to me that I'm the least prominent widow at the prominent widows table at lunch. There's Celine Dion, Sheryl Sandberg, and then Joe Biden, prominent widower, walks up, lowers his Ray-Bans, and is like, who invited this chick? But I have things to say. When you lose someone, you go through a lot of metaphors. I think our language falters in the face of death. I don't think our brains are sort of meant to comprehend it. And so I remember opening every letter of sympathy after Jake died and hoping that in one of those letters, I'd have a glimmer of hope every time I opened it, that the answer would be inside. That someone would tell me the reason that our lives had been so utterly changed in an instant. And the fact is, those words couldn't tell me that in any of those letters. The reasons for his death are not apparent. Luckily, the reasons for continuing to live are. But I searched for a way to communicate what I was feeling. And I love the idea of a divine spark. It crosses a lot of cultures. The idea that you carry a bit of the Creator inside you, that it animates your life. And I picked this quote because it's Joshua Chamberlain, colonel in the 20th Maine Regiment of the Union Army, because he was a patriot. He was also a college professor and intellectual who saw a cause worth fighting for, and he got up and risked his life and fought for it. He also was awarded the Medal of Honor for a really badass bayonet charge down Little Round Top at Gettysburg. I'm a Southerner, I know a weird amount about the Civil War. And in thinking about that spark, the metaphor occurred to me. Jake's soul to me was a bonfire. He was here, and he was in your face, and he was warm, and he was bright. He roared with enthusiasm at the beginning, even the hope of something new, sometimes a little too much. He threw sparks into the night air, silhouetted against a dark canvas until they landed on everyone in his vicinity. He mellowed to embers as the night wore on, sometimes over a glass of bourbon. And I lived the last 7 years of my life looking at a bonfire. Not that I don't have my own fire, because I do. I warmed my hands and found comfort in the glow. I've also damn near burnt myself and gotten a waft of smoke at exactly the wrong time, because that's life and that's fire. It's not all s'mores and sweetness. But when Jake died, my gaze had to change. And it's like when you are in a really bright room, like a floodlight, and it gets turned off, and suddenly you're blinking away those green spots. And in that moment, when my perspective changed so jarringly and so completely, it's not that I couldn't see a way forward, it's that I wasn't sure that anything existed, that the way did not exist. That's how huge it was. But there's good news. The truth was that my eyes just needed to adjust. And it took time. And I still live on the edge of that bonfire. Our family lives on the edge of that bonfire. And sometimes it feels colder than it used to. The world feels colder. And sometimes the cold scares me. The fire's a little bit more remote than it used to be. And my distance from it, it feels disconcerting, even when it relieves my pain. And that's another thing I've found out about grief, is that, one more point. And then sometimes I'll be sitting there, and without warning, like a hot ember in your hand, I will catch a memory, and it will sear just like the first day. But then I remember that that also means he's not so far away, and it makes me smile. And that's the weird thing about this grief journey, is that relief from it can sometimes be pain, and then pain can bring you relief. But most days, we live on the edge of the fire, and it doesn't feel cold or searing. The scent of the fire is in our hair and on our old sweatshirts. It's in the sparks. The spark is in my children's eyes. And we are happy every day, and we are sad every day, and every day is beautiful. Right after Jake died, because I am 100% Jake Brewer's wife, I looked up some clinical studies on the science of grief. And I found that our first daughter was cognitively just where she might be able to form memories of him that she could hold on to until adulthood. And I also learned little girls are sometimes more prone to forming those memories super early because they get verbal faster. And little girls with highly verbal mothers are the most likely. So she's got that going for her. And a psychologist told me to pick a picture that meant something to her that she could look at. And this is Georgia's memory of Georgia and Dada on the boat. And that's right. And it occurred to me in going through this process, I'm the steward of this spark. We are the steward of this life and this memory, and it's there, and it lives on. But it is something I have to breathe life into every day, again and again. Which brings me to Jake's original pitch for this speech. He emailed me one day all excited last year. Remind me to tell you my idea for a speech that puts the founding fathers in modern times as startup founders. Basically Silicon Valley meets Sons of Liberty. A bunch of dudes in their 20s totally disrupting the status quo, taking on a totally entrenched wealthy power with a new crazy idea after moving west. The story has every conceivable character. Some of my favorites: George Washington, CEO, Alexander Hamilton, CFO, Thomas Jefferson's chief strategy officer, Ben Franklin, my favorite, wizened, super quirky, philandering advisor investor figure. It's funny looking back, he pitched this right around the time that Hamilton was making its debut. And wow, do I wish he could have seen that play. Oh. This is just me bragging. Oops. Plenty has been said about Hamilton by those who can say it better than I can. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But suffice to say that I love that people are learning his story and enjoying it. When I first heard about it, I said, wait, a hip-hop rock opera about the Founding Fathers with a rap battle about the constitutional implications of the Fed, sign me up. I'm just surprised everybody else likes it. But there's something so powerful and beautiful about literally recasting these historical figures who seem so remote, who seem far away, as something that makes them more relatable. Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ron Chernow before him, who wrote the book it's based on, saw the story of this amazing hardscrabble underdog, and they said, I'm the steward of this story and this spark. And it's there, and it should live, and I have to breathe life into it every day. And Miranda did it in a way that didn't take away the founders' faults, or their dignity, or their humanity. Jake and I, on the other hand, that's the father of our country giving a TED Talk, wearing a pair of Chucks. There's Ben Franklin. You know Ben Franklin liked to wear a Hawaiian shirt with like a little chest hair sticking out? He fancied himself very West Coast. Here they are writing the terms and conditions of America. It's like Uber, but for countries. Well, look, I think Jake's thought in coming up with this was one, and if you knew Jake, I'm sure you'll see this in him. Yes, we should celebrate what these guys did. It was literally revolutionary. It was innovation. It was a radical change in what the entire history of humanity had thought possible for what we could build in a society. It has its troubles, obviously. But the idea of founding a society on distributing power, warning against the concentration of it, and putting up a bunch of barriers to doing that is pretty astounding. It took fighting, it took fortitude, and it took forbearance from people who could have crowned themselves king and decided not to. It also must be said that much like Silicon Valley is full of innovation and miracles and the promise of a better life, and the tech scene in general, it also has, shall we say, its share of douchery? Let's not kid ourselves. Ben Franklin would, look, I kept this PG, it's a family event. But Ben Franklin would definitely be at the strip club. I would like to think that he's sitting down for another intellectually stimulating podcast called Founding Mothers with Abby Adams in this shot, but don't think that's what's going on. But I do know that if he spends too much time partying, Dolly Madison's VC is going to kick his ass this year. Look, they were people. They were incredibly smart. They were also pompous, self-important, had blind spots 1,000 miles wide. And they did great things. And I think that's one of the things that appeals to people about Hamilton. It's what makes this rekindling of this interest in American history so powerful. It's an unabashed celebration, and it's a sly critique, but it doesn't have a chip on its shoulder. There's no requirement from Miranda that these guys be 100% saint or 100% sinner, and that we can be satisfied with somewhere in the middle. He's not hitting you over the head with a lesson. He's just telling you a story. It's a story of the greatest startup that the world has ever seen, America. And that's life. It can be imperfect, and it can be incredibly worth celebrating. It can hold beauty and brutality. For those of you who knew Jake, you know he was an optimistic person. I was the skeptic in the relationship, at least on matters of public policy. He prided himself on combining unshakable optimism with a healthy dose of realism. And sometimes I'd be like, babe, the glass is just half empty, and admitting it is going to help us fill it sooner. But the right amount of pessimism, I think, can be helpful. Again, combining these two things. You don't have to be 100% one or the other. He used to tisk me sometimes for being a little too dark. Sometimes I think he's testing me this election cycle. Possibly trolling me. But And I hate to go back to the Miranda well again, but he's so great right now, so hot right now. I read this quote from him the other day and thought, this is what I need. He's talking about the parallels between this election cycle and his work. He says, I think the parallel is like, 'twas ever thus. I think the notion of our founders being these perfect men who got these stone tablets from the sky that became our Constitution and Bill of Rights is bullshit. They did a remarkable thing in sticking the landing from revolution to government. That's the hardest thing to do. You can go across the ocean to France where they totally fucked it up and got stuck in a cycle of revolution and tyranny. So that's not nothing. So I guess the biggest takeaway is, yes, this election cycle is bizarre, but it's no more bizarre than the election in 1800 wherein Jefferson accused Adams of being a hermaphrodite. And Adams responded by spreading rumors that Jefferson died. So Adams would be the only viable candidate. He was counting on news to travel slow. That weirdly gives me hope. Me too. There's a song in Hamilton that Aaron Burr and Hamilton both sing to their children about making the world a better place. I sing it to my daughter every night, to both my daughters every night, because it sounds just like their father talking to them. Now, he had a much better voice than I do, but I hope that they can hear him. And the lyrics are, if we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you, and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. We're not perfect. We don't have all the solutions. We have some great ideas, and we live in the greatest experiment in mankind as a framework for launching those ideas. We are the stewards of the American story. We are the stewards of this spark. It is there, and it lives, and we can breathe new life into it every single day. Thank you.